Hello, all. Thank you for joining the Human Libraries of Procurement podcast. We call this Human Libraries of Procurement for three basic elements: the human connect, the libraries part, which shows knowledge and wisdom, and procurement because we talk about procurement. We have one such human libraries today with us, Christopher Smith. Chris, thank you for doing this. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with y'all.
Right, Chris. So, Chris, we'll start with your career journey and intro, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. My career really has been about helping organizations create better outcomes through ethical leadership, strategic procurement. It's been a passion of mine to be able to share procurement excellence, procurement leadership, procurement integrity, and especially in the public space. And I'm honored to be one of your first, if not your first guest in the public procurement space, having worked in federal, state, and local governments and knowing how important that is to touch every one of us. So it's been a great journey. I started off in the private sector with Anderson Consulting, which later became Accenture. I
Right.
did that for about 7 years. I worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, one of our large defense government contracting consulting companies, before it split and got bought by a hedge fund company, became Booz and Company and Booz Allen for 7 years. And I've been at various other aspects, and most recently worked in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is
Mhm.
older than the rest of the United States, 1742, where U.S. is celebrating its 250th anniversary this year, and working for Fairfax County government, and which is one of the largest counties in America. And prior to that, City of Alexandria in public procurement, in the local space. So it's a pleasure to be here to be able to share public procurement, the synergies between private and public procurement, and the opportunities we have to collaborate together and really bring a lot of the best practices of private procurement to the public sector.
Right. Thank you, Chris, for that wonderful intro. You are actually the first public procurement person that I'm talking to. So it's an honor for me as well. So thank you on that.
I'm very humbled and honored and I want to represent public procurement the best that I can, so that we can encourage people to, I would say, come to the dark side, and maybe we can maybe poach some of your best and brightest out of the private sector, and then also think about the opportunities for public sector folks to get some private sector experience.
Right. And lots of good experience. So well done there. Before we move forward, I have a disclaimer here. Because Chris has worked in so many places, and it is logical that some names might come out. But in general, or in any case, we are not representing any company. So even if some name comes out, it is not intended, and we are here on our own capacity. So that's the disclaimer. I also have the write-up for Chris, which I'll just read it out. So, Chris Smith is a public procurement leader with extensive experience in government contracting, strategic sourcing, and operational excellence. He is passionate about advancing procurement best practices, driving innovation, and strengthening public trust through transparency and accountability. Chris is recognized voice in procurement leadership and continuous improvement, committed to promoting leadership, innovation, and strengthening public trust across the profession. So that's the intro that I have. And that was the two heavy minutes from my side. So going forward, it would be more of Chris. All right. So you have many certifications and educational qualification, if you would like to talk about them.
Yeah, so certifications in the public sector are a lot more important than I think in the private sector. And so my first 15 years in the private sector, working for Booz Allen and Accenture and others, the experience was the results. So when you delivered results, you didn't need to have an MBA or a doctorate degree. You didn't need to be a PMP. It was about the results. If the clients were willing to hire you and pay the $300 or $500 an hour rates, then the results, you're always continuing to deliver value. It's very hard on the public sector in a more bureaucratic organization to differentiate minimal qualifications or qualifications for different levels of leadership, thought leadership, and delivery. So I think certifications become more important. So later on in my career, as I switched more to working in the federal, state, and local levels, you need these credentials and these certifications as lifelong learning, and then you need to maintain them, as well as the code of ethics, because politics creeps in. So I have I'm a member of the NIGP, National Institute of Government Procurement. I'm a member of some local chapters in Virginia, Maryland, two in Virginia, and Washington, D.C., and Maryland. I'm a member of PMI, where I'm recertifying as a PMP certified
Right.
professional. And then at the state level, I have the VCO, the VCA, the VCRM certifications, which are the requirements to do dollar thresholds and certain complex higher risk procurement methods for IT, things that are over $100,000, $250,000 contracts, etc. So I've earned those. I'm very proud of those, but I see those as a way to have a platform to be able to do your job, to be able to mentor and train others. For me, certifications was never about collecting alphabet soup A to Z after my name. It's never about collecting titles. They represent continuous learning, continuous improvement. They give you
Right.
some certain level of credibility to be able to speak to the same vernacular and the same syntax with others. Procurement is changing rapidly with technology, with AI, with globalization, with risk management, with supplier collaboration. We need to having professional development and having those credentials, but I'm very concerned about the future of federal, state, and local procurement as it pertains to budgeting for that continuous learning, for that professional development. I see budgets being cut. It's the first thing cut. Public procurement is often not the highest paid total compensation way. A lot of people go in it for other reasons um, other than salaries and total compensation. They go in it for public service. They go in there for impact. What we need to do from an investment perspective to sustain it and also to keep up with and try to get closer to what's happening in the private sector.
Right. I think we will talk about more about, the similarities or the differences between the public and the private sector. But I think one of the most similar thing would be that we both have budget constraints. The budget constraint is there for public procurement. It is there for private procurement companies as well. Any ideas as to, how we can improve this?
Yeah, a few things that come straight to mind. One article I just wrote on LinkedIn, and by the way, I want to encourage all your followers to connect to you and to me to
Yes.
continue this conversation and continue this synergy, this dialogue, because we are so much stronger together. And I think
Right.
in the past, private and public procurement have not done a great job of coming together and looking for synergies and looking for best practices. One thing I look for is 2%. I call it 2% for 98%. If we can invest, and this may or may not translate across industries, but 2% of the overall government budget should be pertained to support the other 98% from a
Right.
compliance perspective, from a public trust perspective. Now, maybe 2% is too aspirational of a goal. It's too high of a price to pay. But I see fractional percent, not even 1% sometimes invested in procurement. And I also see in local and state government, they're not even called procurement. They're called purchasing, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
I'm a big advocate of having a mindset shift to call it procurement, look at it for its strategic value. We
Right.
need to look at highlighting the good cases and the bad cases, the great success stories, the soar stories, the situation, the obstacle, the action, the result of what we achieve by applying best practices. But we also need to look at, when the absence of best practices, what kind of risks and costs and tragedies and very, very negative things. We need to do a better case of writing both of those and
Right.
sharing those stories, because I think through storytelling, I think we really will get through to the executives, to the C levels, the CEOs and COOs on the private side, but on the public side as well. The county executives, the city managers, the elected officials, the mayors, the vice mayors. And that also goes into the positioning of, where should procurement be? Should it be
Right.
under ops? Should it be under finance? Should it be its own department, its own division? And looking at it from a perspective of, I like to compare it to like the FBI or the CIA or the TSA. And I realize those are US based terms, but the equivalents in other countries
Right.
where we don't get credit or have zero defects, right? So I'm not looking for a zero defect environment, but like great procurement in the federal, state, and local space, when things are going great, doesn't get any accolades. It's just
Right.
expected. The engine behind the scene doesn't happen. So we don't typically get the investment. But when we have fraud, waste, abuse, non-compliance, we find way too many stories. But a lot of them don't get. They get local visibility. They don't get national, international trends. like the federal government created like a healthcare website, Affordable Care Act to be able to provide healthcare everywhere. Well, the requirements were really weak, and they didn't have a lot of really good procurement best practices, and they hired the lowest bidder, and there was a complete debacle where this
Right.
website was crashing. It couldn't handle performance. It couldn't do the basic things. So when things are going well, procurement is in the background. It's silent. It's taken advantage of. When things are going poorly, then we're like, okay, only when real risks are achieved do we really think about, and then it's really a short-term focus to put some band-aids here, but it really never gets fully funded like it should. And that goes to hiring the right people, doing the right training, the right certifications, and making it a place where we are paying fair compensation and have a lifelong career possibility. I think we should be able to do more with less, but we also do more with more where we're doing investments in technology like AI and other e-procurement tools. But in the government space, probably like the private sector space, a lot of the ERP systems and a lot of the tools weren't really designed for efficient and effective procurement. So there's a lot there, a lot of opportunity, I think, to go from administrative taken advantage of to strategic, value added, higher return on investment where I can write business cases that for every added personnel I get, you're going to get this increase in speed, you're going to get this increase in quality and compliance, you're going to get this increase in cost savings. You tell better stories of the greatness that could be and that is happening and why we can emulate that, and also
Right.
the negative things that are happening that could be avoided. We want to avoid to being, on a great day, public procurement is keeping everyone off the front page of the newspaper. Fraud, waste, abuse, non-compliance, and other ethical and integrity issues.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of good points there. Thank you again for covering those. Like you said, if anyone wants to contact Chris, I would put the contact information in the comment section. He's available in LinkedIn. So I think a lot of good points there. Budget is a point. Where does procurement sit? That is again a great point. Is it reporting to finance? Is it reporting to ops? How is procurement seen? But I wanted to go back a little bit to your career again. You have been with many roles. Which are the roles that you
All
have
right. I'm going
done?
to talk
And
most recently about where I'm at now. I didn't find local and state procurement till the last 5 years of my
Mhm.
career. And I really, despite the challenges in that space, I really am most passionate about and why I've really gone into LinkedIn and started to share and mentor and train and really bring some visibility into public procurement at the local and state level. Um, Going into a team like coming out of COVID, where the whole team pretty much turned over, they all left because of what happened was people were going remote, going hybrid, emergency procurement, and people were the aging of our procurement force was getting, a lot of people hitting retirement age and leaving,
Right,
and
right,
that huge brain drain. My role in like City of Alexandria and Fairfax County is looking at the many hats that people had to wear, the breaking of silos, the resistance to change, to the most dangerous word in public procurement and maybe in all of procurement is we've always done it this way, right?
right,
I don't
right,
know if you're seeing a lot of that on your side, but
right.
you're working with some people that have been doing this for 20 or 30 years. It's been a very an admitted, they were call purchasing for majority of their career. The word procurement, you're doing procurement, but in some cases you're in a purchasing division. And so when I was working for one city, we were actually we were under finance, and
Right.
actually the person who was the director of finance was the former head of the budget for the city. She was all about reducing costs, reducing budgets, including ours, and wanting to lead by example. So every year we would cut one or two FTE from the overall department. That's short-sighted for some short-term wins, but long-term, you have to have career paths and develop your succession planning for your leadership and be able to have the whole breadth of understanding of what we're doing and having a mission and vision and values not only for the organization but for your procurement, your capability, and have it in alignment is really key. So I saw that really lacking coming most of my career from the private side, working with the federal, state, and local as a contractor or a consultant. Whereas I think that some local, state, and federal organizations are anywhere from 10 to 100 years behind the private sector. And that is really scary. I
Right.
think AI is going to change that, hopefully,
Yeah.
and help bridge that gap. But We have some local governments that only have one person doing purchasing or procurement. And on top of that, in some cases, you have one person, just 10 or 20% of one person doing the purchasing or procurement role, and then they're also HR and IT and some other things. So they're
Right.
very distracted, right?
So now that we are talking about public procurement and private procurement, what are the difference and all? How do you see public procurement so that we can compare it with private procurement, let's say?
So public procurement is more about integrity, ethics, accountability, transparency, and about getting things done, but it's not going to be as agile or as fast as private procurement. So
Right.
we have a lot more rules and things to know. So I
Mhm.
think that also goes back to certification, for instance. So
Right.
my certification with NCMA for is, they have several, three or four of them at the federal level and overall. And it's about understanding if you're working with the federal government and federal funds and you're doing federal procurement, it's the FAR, the
Mhm.
FAR. If you're working with the defense in the defense area, you have the DFAR. And those are very, very bureaucratic, very strict guidelines of what you can and can't do and how to do procurement to make it compliant from an audit perspective. So it's the auditability as well. And then at the state level, you have in Virginia, you have the VPPA. So you have the state laws and policies and procedures and expectations and best practices,
Mhm.
which in Virginia, the cities and the states are required to, there are some exceptions. There's like university procurement, counties and cities and utilities, et cetera, that must follow this. And then there's different spending thresholds and different state agencies that have to follow that. So understanding those and then apply and then creating your own policies and procedures booklet of what you can and can't do, and then having to share that with the vendor community
Right.
to get contract and so that they understand how to do B2G business. They understand how to do business with your entity because your entity is going to be different than the next county, the next city, the next state. And then you need to make it in an appetizing way where the risks and the process is not too burdensome and is worthwhile in a win-win way so that you'll get all the vendors coming to the marketplace, as many as possible, including small businesses and disadvantaged businesses. It's a process where everyone has to keep their records and everything in written form for several years, even after the contract's completed, in order for audits to happen. And it gets more complicated when you get grant fund where the funding is coming from and the terms and conditions and what we can and can't negotiate and what is going to be out for lowest bid versus what's going to be best value. And then there's different categories as well, like IT, professional services. We do emergency procurement, sole source, cooperative procurements.
Right.
So we're using some terms and some channels that may not resonate with the people in the private sector where things are more, it's about speed, it's about what's the impact to so I think the private sector does a better job with alignment to the
Right.
profit and loss, to the operational cost, to cost savings. And we have a lot of opportunities in the public sector for cost savings that we can't get to because of the bureaucracies and the process we must follow. If you're going to compare buying an IT something on the public side versus the private side, you're going to see cost and risk differences significant in that, like, why is the public paying so much more? The private sector has more agility. We can't strategically have a partnership with just one supplier for a long period of time. We have to have open and fair competition on a more regular basis. So if your incumbent is performing, they have nothing to worry about. They're going to continue to get the work. We have to sometimes recompete them at the 2, the 5, the 10 year, or reevaluate them on a year-to-year basis. Where
And I
that's
think I think the main thing is about the extent that it goes. We also have clip levels, certain approvals, and certain things that we can negotiate, cannot negotiate. There are policies and all that. But I think what the main differentiator is the extent that it goes, or actually, how much is the speed that matters. You touched a little bit on the categories that you have supported. Tell us about what are the categories that you have done.
so the great thing about being in state and local government with smaller teams, you wear many, many more hats. In Alexandria, I was involved in professional services, IT, including staff augmentation and consultants, MOUs, MOAs. So, or just any type of a contractor agreement that requires some sort of agreement between two organizations. Also P card purchases, so all the small
Right.
dollar purchases. You get to do everything that really is necessary from a procurement perspective for a state and local government. And we wear many different hats. So for the county, there's more segmented. There's about almost 100 people in the procurement department. And so the difference between the city and the county, I was in a purchasing division under finance in the city, and in the county, there's about 100 folks in the procurement department, and that was made a very big difference in terms of having its own autonomy, its own resources, its own training. It had other challenges too, but then we were able to break into 5 teams and be able to specialize to support like 50 plus agencies. So to do public works and police, and so you have one team that's focused on public safety, and that's done in a special way. A lot more emergency procurements and some sole source things there. Um, Others to do like public works, and so I got to be able to do a lot of different things, and then a whole different division to do the capital improvements, so all the building and construction contracts, and then another team to do IT. So being able to
Right.
work in those different sectors was is get to do, and you get to be a generalist and a specialist depending
Right.
on the size of your government.
Yeah. I think that generalist and the specialist, that's two things that procurement always goes in and goes out, right? So you can be one time you can be a generalist, and then you can be a very specialist kind of thing in a one category.
And I think that one of the challenges in the public sector, and this is for the folks that I'm trying to steal from the private sector, the best talented folks to come in and bring some innovation and some ideas, some energy, is that the challenge is those people are so established and they're making so much money and so much impact. It's hard to attract them to the public sector because
Right.
what happens is public sector is in a best scenario, they have a career path to go from like the contracts analyst to a specialist 1 to a 2 to a 3, formal or informal, and like a way. And you're trying to bring someone into from the private sector or from even another entity. The learning curve is steep on the processes, on the technologies, and the culture. But in some cases, it doesn't work well. It doesn't mesh well because they don't do onboarding at all, and then especially they're not used to hiring experienced hires. And then a lot of times in a specialist environment, you people don't see the big why or see the entire picture, right?
Yeah. Right. And any success stories that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is stories about um, culture and how important culture and mindset is in public procurement.
Right.
People come in with a private sector mindset or come in with a save the world mindset. We have to take things in smaller chunks. The resistance to change is high.
Right.
We've always done it this way is prevalent.
Hmm.
You're in a highly bureaucratic organization. In some cases, people that are there that they fell into or they got hired there, and they don't know why they're there, and we don't know why they're there, and we can't get rid of these people, right? So merit is sometimes lacking, right? And
Right.
you have problem resources that you have to live with and you have to work with and you have to do the best you can with them. So um, public sector, you can do your job so well, and there's so many different stakeholders, and what you're by bringing accountability, integrity, transparency, asking questions, being inquisitive, bringing best practices, challenging the status quo, trying to innovate, trying to continuously learn, trying to continuously innovate has to happen and has to be a cultural value, or you can be a threat to the organization.
Right. Yes.
And this is the one area where your performance and being an A plus player could get you a short-lived career or short-lived time at a job.
Yeah.
And you'd think the opposite would be true, where A plus players coming in, being team players, trying to not take credit would be seen as worthy of recognition, worthy of promotion, worthy of job retention.
Right.
And the absolute reality is you can come in too hard, too fast, too strong, and get yourself out of a job very quickly. A lot of times in the public procurement areas, the success isn't well defined. Processes are not well defined, and things that keep you up at night, risks and
Right.
nightmares, and no risk mitigation, no risk management. Rubber stamping purchase orders, blanket purchase orders. So that would be one story I would talk about, is about beware of the mindset and the culture of the government you're in public procurement. The other is independent oversight and auditability. So my father was an inspector general in the military, so maybe I emphasize this too much. And he reached the rank of brigadier general in the United States Army and later was sheriff for 16 years. Very proud of my dad. And I
Oh,
try to emulate and try to live up to his ideals of public service and integrity and service, honor, country, and basically pour back into that. But inspector generals and audits and internal and external audits and compliance positions in government are essential. And when they're not there, we need to question why.
right,
And where they exist in the organization is very important as well. And a lot of times we can't see our blind spots, or we've been doing the same thing. And there's politics that are involved at the executive level, the county executive level, the mayor, the elected officials that are trying to have their contracts awarded to their benefactors or contributors, local preference or whatever. We need to be Switzerland. We need to be neutral. We need to be fair and open and equitable and equal opportunities for everyone for competition. No one gets any inside information. We don't try to wire it to a incumbent, or we don't try to wire it to a specific vendor. Some states like Florida have inspector generals and have open transparency laws. They call them sunshine laws, where everything is able to be done in the light of day. So what you're doing is like always someone looking over your shoulder. Some states would say it's too much transparency to the point where it actually slows things down. But other states like Virginia, I think, need more sunlight and transparency. And with that, I mean inspector generals, internal audits, external audits. And by the way, when we fail an external audit or an internal audit or our compliance check, we have findings and recommendations. I think those are learning opportunities. Yes, it's a bad mark essentially, but we need to have those corrective guardrails in place, because ultimately the public sector is in the public trust business.
right,
And
right.
as you know, and this is happening, I think, all across the world, not just in the US, our elected leaders and our elected institutions, like especially where they're single party rule for such a long time, have lacking of trust, lacking of innovation, lacking of a continuous improvement. It's the status quo continues. And that's when fraud, waste, abuse, non-compliance comes in. If I could have any wishes in public procurement to make it better, I would not only increase the budget size to increase the resources, I'd also increase the compliance side, not to slow things down, but to make sure the guardrails are there so that we don't end up on the end of the newspaper. It is really going to be the pathway to increasing public trust, increasing the credibility of our elected leaders, increasing the elected of our government institutions where they've been on the downfall. Like I think colonoscopies, doing trash, and any other thing that's unwanted even divorce has a higher rating than some institutions, local governments, state and federal governments, and that's a shame. It shouldn't be that way. And if we had executive leadership, innovation, investment in critical areas like public procurement, I think that could easily change.
I
Yeah.
want to touch on one topic here. You said about army and defense, and there was one discussion that I was part of, and they said that more procurement people should be from armed forces because the kind of mentality we need in procurement. So your views that should we have more military and army people join procurement?
I think so. And I think at the federal level, we have that in the United States. I think a lot of people that do acquisitions, they call it acquisitions. They don't really call it procurement. The
Okay.
terminology is the same, but it's different words. But I think military from a logistics perspective, and a supply perspective, in an agile way, basically how to take an army and move it across the world, and then feed the army and supply it with weapons and supply logistics and all the shipping and all the different methods of transportation. So I think the military is a great example of an organization that does procurement and logistics and supply chain well. We know whole battles and wars, from the Revolutionary War in the United States, Civil War, cutting off the supply chains, surrounding the enemy, having mass, having speed, the same elements of what is successful in war also translates to the private sector in terms of
Right.
being able to be first to market and having a competitive advantage and getting all the rare earth minerals and having strategic suppliers, and those things are very important. They're very important in the military, but also from a government perspective. My father was his last job, it was at First Cavalry Division, Fort Hood, Texas, the largest division, and has been in every war in the United States since the
Right.
beginning of time, really. And so there was a two-star general who happened to be Wes Clark, who headed NATO, and he later became a four-star general, ran for president of the United States. And then there were two one-star generals, one was a one-star general, assistant division commander of maneuvers, and the other one is of supply. And that's how important it is that at the executive level, they have one that's the combatant commander, who moves the troops and does the actual warfare and operations, and the other one is supply and logistics. And when they went unfilled, my father did both roles. And he also, when they were filled, he did one like a few years as the maneuver assistant division commander and a few years as the supply logistics division commander. It is so important in warfare, and it's also important in operations. I do think the skill sets for military folks that are doing acquisitions and their discipline and their intensive training and they're having warrant officers and having warrants to procure unlimited contracts and carry around. So I think that comment about hiring people from the military into government, into private sector, and getting them involved in the alignment of the mission, whether it be profit, or whether it be public trust, is a really great fit, and I would concur with those thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. Public sector has a lot of cooperatives, and could you tell us a little bit more about how cooperatives work?
So, like I said, sometimes the city or the entity is only a one person or a fraction of an FTE or a small team of like less than 10 people. You get the procurement requisition and it was needed yesterday. And
Right.
they knew about it for 6 months and they sat on it and you have no time, you need it today or something's going to happen. That might trigger an emergency procurement. Okay. Depending on what the definition, we can get into that. It's a whole nother topic about what is or isn't an emergency. But cooperatives are important in that those entities that are lacking resources, they don't have the time or the ability or the tools or the training, or even sometimes they're not buying at bulk. They're not buying so many of the commodity or the category. They don't have the skill specialization to do the oversight, to do the competition, to know best value, to be able to score it. And so when time is lacking, when budget is lacking, when resources are lacking, then cooperatives fill that need. And so cooperatives happen all the time. So there's big ones like Sourcewell and Omnia Partners and Gov Movement and Equalis and many different ones out there that are available. And then they also have NASPO that has the national state limits all over the country. So they'll go out and do like body worn cameras. They'll do IT reseller services. They'll go out and do tractors. They'll do so anything you can think of, any commodity or service that you would think of that you need. They can go out and do an open national competition. They advertise in national newspaper to maximum amount. So now they do it. They have a lead agency and they have a board. They review all the proposals coming in for best value and they were able to then select the top ones, negotiate, have not to exceed pricing or have a pricing schedule that says, okay, and the competition for these are usually, when done correctly, is vast. And so they serve as a way to basically create a shopping mall, so to speak, and you can have multiple cooperatives with multiple different things. So you have a IT services reseller on one cooperative and a different one on another, and you can go and ask for proposals or go ask for give me some pricing, give me a contract for them. And now you don't have to do an open fair competition. The open and fair competitions already existed that cooperative might exist for 5 or 10 years. That contract basically has all the procurement compliance done. Now, all cooperatives aren't the same. There are certain cooperatives that are run by nonprofits. There are certain cooperatives that are led by local and state and governments. The federal government has a GSA schedule, which is basically the General Service Administration
Right.
creates an IT-70 or mass schedule, and they vet stuff and they create price lists, and then certain procurements are allowed there. So this is a way to allow agility and speed when you don't have the resources, you don't have the technology, tools, and training to be able to do it on your own, or in many cases where it doesn't make sense. And because we're having to do more with less, we're seeing a larger share every year of cooperative procurement, both on the value side and on the speed side. The other great part about it, it gives you your time back to do other oversight and do some strategic things in your organization, putting in metrics and measures and training your organization about compliance at all levels. That sometimes the cooperative entity itself will take a small percentage of the dollar value in order to
Right.
self-sustain and remain profitable or remain existing. The lead agency sometimes will get like up to 1% back of that fee, and that helps. And so now procurement in the public space isn't just a cost driver. It's a savings driver. And in some cases, by being the lead agency and being best in practice and having many, many people use the cooperative, you get as a revenue generating to help offset some of the costs and be able to invest in tools, technology, and training.
Right. There is a concept called managed spend program. I think this is similar to that, and it's an interesting concept. And I think the future will see more of this. I think this will only increase as we go ahead. So interesting. There's one more topic that I wanted to touch. I wanted to talk about ethics in
I
procurement.
think without integrity, you have nothing to stand on, right? So I
Yeah,
think integrity is a core value. The mindset of integrity and core value is not in your public service organization or in your procurement organization. I think you might want to think about exiting stage right. Um, when you talk about fair competition and fair negotiations, you want to come from a place where you're not tricking your suppliers. You're being open and transparent to the extent you're allowed to be in a fair way, where you're sharing the same information with all of them and not just excluding so that someone has favorable status. And that goes to conflict of interest, right? We have to be firewalled in a way where our job is protected so that when we do the right thing and we say no, but and yes, but
mhm,
like, you have all these stakeholders that come in from the police department, they go to their conferences around the world. They find these silver bullets, the vendors, they go to the vendor show, they find this great thing. And
yeah,
now we're separating wants versus needs versus reality versus budgets, right? So, and then on top of that, the politics. You have the politicians that are always being lobbied, always
right,
being having to self-fund, and they have their benefactors and they want their personal favors, and that may have been existing in the 50s or the 40s or what have you, but in a fair government, there's no quid pro quo for you give me this money to help me get elected, and then I'm going to guarantee you a contract. That's illegal. And
right,
so what we need to have is we need to have a high degree of ethics, a high degree of transparency. Sunlight is a great disinfectant of being able to say, every single situation I do, I document why I did it and what basis, what rules, what my thinking was, so that I'm trying to be as neutral and unbiased as possible in doing my work, as well as the people that work for me and work with me. But conflict of interest, making sure that no one has a financial interest, even a perceived interest in, like, they own a stock or their brother-in-law is the CEO of the company that's bidding or
right,
responding. We don't want any insider information. We don't want any unfair advantage. We want equal opportunity for all businesses. We want to encourage small businesses, disadvantaged businesses. We want to get as many, it's hard enough to get vendors to want to do business with the federal government. There's a lot. And then when you start going down from the federal to the state to the local, the number of vendors and suppliers continues to dwindle because business isn't big enough. And then on top of that, you got to remember that vendors have a cost that they don't get paid for by bidding and responding. Now, AI, I think, is going to help minimize that a little bit, but we got to be cognizant of the bids and the responses are costly to our vendors, and we do not want to waste their time. We do not want to waste their energy. We do not want to hurt the trust with them. We want to encourage more competition to get better value and lower cost. And so ethics and integrity is the heart of that. And that's where we need to look in the mirror. That's where we need inspector generals. That's where we need internal and external audits. That's where they need to be independent to be able, those people need to be independent, as not to report to the public body, meaning not to report to the elected officials or the county executive. It's like the Supreme Court justices, right? You have the Supreme Court justices that are appointed for life for a reason, so they
right.
can make things without bias, without influence. And we need similar checks and balances to maintain integrity. We're in the public trust business in public procurement. Private sector, if you fail, bankruptcy, Chapter 11, Chapter 13,
Right.
consolidation. You saw what happened with Spirit Airlines, for instance, in terms of its many challenges. Your failure is you're no longer existence and everyone's out of a job.
Yeah.
Our failure is that we live with those black eyes, those failures, those front page newspaper articles where things have gone wrong and we failed the public. And people need to be accountable. I always say that in the public sector, we keep people out of orange and pink jumpsuits. So keeping them out of jail and then on top of that, being able to sleep at night and being able to keep ourselves out of those same jumpsuits, right? So
I
there's
think one of the things that is about ethics is that when you create that trust, like you said, and you have the equal opportunity for all the suppliers that are there, you get the best value as well. And I think that should be the intention for any buyer. Where and the other thing is that the buyer reputation. You know, at the end of the day, you need to protect your reputation. Otherwise, the supplier knows there's something wrong with him, and he will not trust you.
Absolutely. And like that even goes into the part where is like to do the due diligence, the vendor background check, like to
Mhm.
to check are they disbarred from any state or local government? Do they have a license? Do they have the certificates of insurance proper?
Right,
Uh, is there any negative thing in social media? If their reputation is bad and it creates risk for us and their reputation will move on to our reputation. So that whole supply chain, and we don't get as much opportunity to do that as the private sector does. And to be able to we do the due diligence once at award, and sometimes that's rubber stamped, and some people do it better than others. That's where integrity comes in. We need to be doing it in a consistent manner. A lot of times it's a one-time thing. Do they meet it now, and then set it and forget it? And there's nobody managing the vendor reputation or relationships, and a lot of times the contract administration is even lacking. So you don't hear about a bad contract until the end of the 3 years or the 5 years. I'm like, where have you been? You should have been telling us. We could have been
right.
directing them for success all along the way.
Right. And I also wanted to touch on the supplier diversity that you talked about. It is much more prevalent in US, but I think we have similar kind of models elsewhere as well. I think Europe has a similar kind of model. India also has not
So supplier diversity will have different flavors depending on which local government you're at. You have some
Mhm.
that's a core value, and it's like they want to have a percentage of the business to go to SWAMs, basically small minority women owned, minority
right,
owned businesses, disadvantaged businesses, veteran owned businesses, etc. So there's different set aside. So the federal government has some set aside certain percentages for construction or professional services or subcontractors. The state and local government have thresholds where micro or macro purchases that are P card purchases, may not require three quotes at certain levels, might require you just go out and get a SWAM or you look at, and there's a whole organization that will actually evaluate and make sure and certify SWAMs as SWAMs. And
right,
it gets complex in the United States where there's even some discrepancies between states where there's SWAM preferences in some states and other states don't have them. Based on those local and SWAM preferences, it may or may, depending on where that organization, if the SWAM is based like in Arkansas or DC or California, we might have to consider the laws of those states in Virginia to be able to see whether we can consider them a SWAM or give them the preferences, because like there's like 30 some states that have come together that have like the same definition of SWAM and the same understanding, and it hasn't gone to all 50 states yet. A lot of our smaller dollar purchases, micro and macro purchases, will have SWAM preferences so that they can get, if it's equal or better pricing, or if it's within a certain percentage, either no competition, no quotes are required, or you go ahead and give it to a SWAM and you only allocate it to SWAMs. Others it's open competition based on merit, and what you do is you use the category codes when you're doing your solicitations to actually reach out to, and you encourage those SWAMs to register in a centralized system. In Virginia, we use EVA. You would want to advertise on EVA, and then EVA can, using those codes, all the vendors that do business in Virginia will register there, and then so your advertisements will go and be emailed out, so they'll have equal opportunity and access, and that's kind of replaced our newspaper system and social media and other methods. So the key there is to encourage SWAMs to register, encourage local and small businesses to do business with local state government by getting SWAM certified, to educate all of our vendors how to do business with us, that all the opportunities come to them. And then depending on the dollar threshold, the category or what have you, the rules will differ by locality of of what the preferences will mean in terms of if we have two ties, the SWAM will win. Let me caution it still has to be based on merit and by law in terms of the compliance piece. So what that means is that in order to do local preference or SWAM preference at the local level, in some cases you need to do disparity studies. Well, what is the percentage of business going to SWAM businesses? And in some cases, is it disproportionate? Is it out of alignment? And that way, if you can actually do those studies and find those areas, you can then set asides and modify your policies, procedures, and your award criteria to help mitigate that disparity. So it is a newer area that continues to evolve, and we're educating all of our procurement folks on to figure out how to make the playing field level on an equity perspective, on a quality perspective, on a transparency and a fairness perspective, so that we not only get best value, but we get equal opportunity for suppliers. We get diversity of suppliers, and we don't leave small businesses behind
Right.
because often.
There's one more concept that procurement needs the seat at the leadership table. I don't know if that is much applicable in the public sector. Views on how procurement can get a seat at the leadership table, or
I think we
how
don't.
yeah, sorry, go
Yeah, sorry to interrupt there. I think that we just don't buy the table. Don't buy the table,
Right,
and then let them have their meeting.
right,
Don't buy the construction.
yeah,
In the beginning, there was nothing. And on the seventh day, God rested, and then procurement came, right?
yeah,
So right. So,
yes,
and I say that in a humorous way. I don't want to offend anyone's religions or anything like that. That's not my intent. My intent here
yeah,
is just to say procurement is essential. And we're
right.
visible when things are going wrong
Mhm.
and not visible when things are going right. It's about coalitions and about partnership. It's about sharing the mission and breaking the silos down. So you have to have an organization that's scalable that way, and then you can have, and of course, big enough to have a chief procurement officer position, so you have a C-level position at that table. And then we need to demonstrate value. We need to have measures and metrics and SLAs and KPIs. If I can only give you one thing of what I learned from my Virginia Tech executive MBA, international, where I went to Turkey and Ireland and did all over the place, right? Is you get what you measure. So
Right,
measuring quality and having a balanced scorecard to demonstrate, and if you can get it in real time, fantastic. If AI can help you automate that, but having a balanced scorecard, not just measuring speed, not just measuring savings, not just measuring, but you gotta figure out the measures of value, of speed, of cost, of savings, of compliance, of ethics, of reputation. Some things are subjective. So when people complain we're slow, we can write a business case that says we can reduce the bid time from 4 weeks to 1 week by adding this one resource, or adding $50,000 for this tool, adding AI into the process. When we start to bring data, valuable, clean data, measures and metrics to our stories, I think we will get the influence, we'll get the value add. We want to, the thing is, we need to share our success stories. We need
right,
to be able to document the risks averted, the savings achieved, the balanced scorecards that are happening on. The keyword here is synergy, right? It's the synergy of the organization. We are the glue that breaks the silos down often in the organization, but we need to have a voice. We need to have our tools, our budget, and continue to champion a seat at the table. And like I said, if that doesn't work, don't buy the table. Don't get their attention.
one way of doing it. Yeah.
No, but
Uh,
I advocate for what I said earlier. It's just building those relationships.
right, right.
I think all of procurement, regardless of public or private, we're in the relationship business,
Yeah.
and not public trust, but we're in the trust business as well,
Yes, yes. The
right?
trust is the important thing, yes.
Integrity, trust, and accountability. I mean, it's all
Relationship.
there
Yeah.
for all of us. Yeah.
Yep. Uh, you talked about AI as well. How do you see AI in procurement?
I wrote an article recently about the fear of missing out or the fear of being replaced, right? So obviously that's the first place people want to start. Is AI going to replace our jobs in procurement, or what role will AI have and what should it have? I think we need to always be people centric, right? So
Right.
we don't want AI to completely take away our jobs or our roles. We need to have AI needs to be seen as a tool,
Mhm.
a tool just like all the other tools we have to be able to help do things faster and do things better. And if it's looked at from that mindset perspective, I think we'll be okay. We have a lot of things that we are redundant that are not fun to do that AI can do really, really well. From a compliance perspective, it can do audits very well. It can help us with measures and metrics and checking data. It can look at purchase orders and look for compliance. It can do a checklist and things and flag things. So when I was at FICO, so I don't know if you know FICO outside the US, but it's the credit scoring agency, 0 to 1,000 or 0 to 850 or whatever the score is. The higher the score, the lower the risk. 0, 100% risk. The highest score, no risk. I haven't seen perfect on either one of those. And so I was called over to go to Stanford University. And
Right.
Stanford University was one of the largest universities in the United States, one of the largest universities in the world with people, with professors from all over the world, students from all over the world. They wanted their expenditures checked, and they were getting funding from all sources, federal, state, local, and grant. And there's all kinds of rules on those in terms of you can't buy alcohol, you can't fly first class, you can't stay in a suite on
Right.
travel. And these professors were going all over the world to travel, and they were having a major problem with compliance because the professors were living large. Their systems, internal compliance, weren't catching all of that. And of course, if that ever got in the newspaper, and sometimes the audits did find those things, those professors would have to pay that back or lose their jobs, or it would be a black eye for their programs and for their
Right.
specialties and everything. So this is even like 10 or so years ago. I was working for them. We went to do a project. We did some implementation and was to actually use analytics, use AI, because AI has been around a lot longer, whether we call it AI or not, in
Right.
terms of take all the receipts and take all the data and OCR it all and look for keywords and do all kinds of business rules against it so you can create and flag the expenditures of certain people and certain expenditure tracking. I think that kind of compliance of looking at our purchase orders and looking at the actual supply orders to make sure they match, make sure the purchase orders match the intent of the contract, so not have to use blanket purchase orders as much as anymore, where is another business case for it. I think creating training decks where there's no time to create training decks, to creating communications to do change management, and to all fantastic uses of AI. And I think there's a lot of other things we haven't even begun to think about yet in terms of
Right.
what AI is doing now and can do in the future. But allowing us to do more of those strategic things, let the AI do more of the administrative things with oversight, having it flag anomalies, flag risk, and then create risk registers for us, track measures and metrics, give us suggestions for opportunities for improvement. I'm really excited about what AI we have today and what AI is going to be doing for us in the future, both in the public and the private sector. The challenges I have is that the speed to implementation is because it's not understood, and organizations like state, local, and federal governments are risk averse. They are paying for it and are not utilizing it,
Right.
and are the governance around it, the ethics around it, the integrity around it, because they don't understand it or they can't afford it. They're slower adopters of it, and in fact, an example on one of the webinar I was just on recently, they were concerned. They wanted to disqualify vendors who were using AI to create their responses. I'm like, why would you want to do that? And
Right.
by the way, everyone's used Grammarly or auto
Yeah.
spell check or
Right.
GPS or just different things that will do things for us. I'd say if with that mindset, we would disqualify every single bid and response. You want them to
Yeah.
all certify that they did it by hand, and then you're going to close your vendor pool to
Right.
less vendors, less competition, and less diversity by having everyone say that they had no AI involved. And how do you really make sure that happened anyway? All right.
Right.
So
So I
I
think
think a mindset that AI should not be allowed for vendors to respond or bid is not correct.
right.
It's one of the small thinking, and I think they're coming from the perspective of that AI is bad there, but they might also be considered about the workload. If AI is used by all vendors to respond to bids and to RFPs, well, we're going to see an infinite number of, well, we used to get 5 or 10 responses. We might get 100 responses for some commodity or some category.
Right.
And that's a lot of manual work or a lot of work for us to do. But we shouldn't worry about having too many suppliers or too much competition. I think we can use AI to stream them out and use other tools. It's better to have more competition, more responses, more RFPs, and then hopefully hopefully there's a human at the center of it, and they're checking their work so that they are on tap when we do make the award for the best value, lowest responsive bidder. So I think AI, we need to do a lot more education for folks about the powers of AI and the ethics of AI and how to leverage it and where to leverage it in those administrative functions.
Right. Good points on that, AI. And somehow, when we talk about AI, naturally we connect it to the future. Uh, is there anything else that you see for procurement's future? Like how do you see procurement would evolve in the future?
I think procurement is going to be more strategic. It's going to be less administrative. It's going to be more value add. It's going to be more risk mitigation. We're going to have people that not only have a procurement acquisition hat on, but the many hats that they wear. So bringing in subject matter experts, category experts from IT, from professional services. We'll be able to have more lateral transfers within government or within organizations. It'd be a permanent role for someone if they really love it, or it could be a temporary assignment for them to understand and have a rotation through the organization, truly do more with less, and to be able to do investments, to write business cases for those investments so that we can be more value added. We can tell our stories, more valid metrics and measures in the risk mitigation area, in the value add area, in the savings area, more strategic partners, more win-win relationships, more focus on relationships with our clients. So I'm really excited about the future with AI and also just in general about the modernization, the investment in people and tools. Honestly, there's about 80% of the things in the vision of the goals and objectives that I'd like to get to in my organizations. We don't ever have the time to do so. I think,
Right.
in the future, we're going to be able to do those things that we've always wanted to do. And the great thing about procurement, it's never the same every day, right? So
Right. Yes.
different challenge, different risk, different tariff, different compliance issue, different headache, and that seat at the table. It's going to be I think it's going to be a hybrid or virtual seat at the table, and
Right.
I think we're going to see more. Ultimately, I hope the legacy that we leave is that we retire the word purchasing, and we see procurement replacing that.
Right. That's a great thought actually. That the future is exciting. And I think, yeah, we should dump that word purchasing and we go for more procurement. Yep. Uh, Another thing, what we do in procurement is negotiation. So just a general view as to how you approach negotiation or how do you do negotiations.
So negotiations is important because it's about building trust. It's not just winning the deal and then
Mhm.
having to have a win-lose relationship. It's about win-win. And I just did a seminar of negotiations for public procurement because I didn't see a lot of materials or training materials or knowledge or books on the subject.
Right.
So I'm going to focus on it from the public procurement side. It's about doing your homework in advance, and 80%, just like in the private sector, 80% of negotiations is about your prep work. It's about knowing your BATNA and your ZOPA. It's
Mhm.
about knowing the alignment to the mission, vision, and values. It's about identifying up front the non-negotiables. Like, one of the challenges in public procurement is that by law, I cannot indemnify my suppliers. I can't. And
Right.
so some folks won't they want to change the word here. We can redline a word here or there, but I can't completely eliminate indemnification, for instance.
Right.
So um, and there's different levels of risk in the private sector that people are willing to take when it comes to indemnification and stuff like that. So from a negotiating perspective, is to share the process of how to do business with us, encourage and get that to as many vendors as possible to encourage maximum competition and participation, and know the rules and the guidelines up front. Share how we actually do make the awards, the route is for an IFB or an RFP in terms of value-based or cost-based determinations. And then it's about what is or isn't negotiable. And like, for instance, IFBs, we give you the take it or leave it terms and conditions. You cannot, if you submit any other terms and conditions other than that, even if you're the lowest bidder, you're disqualified and not under
Right.
consideration. You just need to know that in the public sector. In the RFP world, everything's negotiable in special terms and conditions, especially in the IT category space. and even in the sole source space where we don't have any leverage, where we need it, they know we need their stuff and they make the rules. But we need it to be locked down, and we need it to let them know there are some non-negotiables even in that space, and what those are, so that we can focus and make a rapid, agile win-win, as much transparency. We're never going to have full transparency in negotiations. And then understanding when it's time to walk away and say, hey, okay, I don't think we can, let's agree to disagree, shake hands and say, thank you for your time, go to the next best response and try to make that
Yeah.
contract work.
I think the BATNA, the ZOPA, the walkaway point, these are similar. The indemnification clause that you said, that is a new information for me. Good learning. That's an interesting point as well. Maybe we should also have it, like no indemnification.
And one other thing that's probably different too is we look at our exit strategy, right? So as a best practice, we try not to have auto renewals as a contract. Like so
Right,
30 days, 45-day notice, 90-day notice, so to remind us, because that might not happen for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And the different contract administration is we have cancel for cause, cancel for, which I'm sure you have,
right,
cancel for convenience. But in addition to that, it's about we have a cancel for lack of funding. Because year to year, we don't know what's funded. What we could be
right.
funded this year might go to zero next year. Fiscal years are year to year. Sometimes they're July 1 to June 30th, or in the federal space, October 1 to September 30th. And because delayed budgets or unknown revenue sources with taxes and everything like that way, we have to have more exit clauses and more exit criteria.
Interesting. There are certain things that we are different, public and private procurement. And like you said, we need to collaborate more. So what are your views on how we can collaborate more and what is the way
I
forward?
think we need to do more benchmarking, and we need to do a better job of understanding our role descriptions, try
Right,
to do some standardizations of an associate in one company is a manager, another one's a salesperson, right? So similar in contract specialist or contracting officer, purchasing agent, purchasing officer, chief procurement officer, and then do a better job of benchmarking the salary rates with HR in terms of figuring out to compare across the markets. Are we paying above market, below market? Are we paying market for those salaries and total compensation packages? And then we can also make a way to attract and retain key personnel, strategic leadership personnel, and then grow them, keep them in the profession longer, so we don't have that brain drain, we don't have that rotation, opposed to having to continually hire and train and spend all that extra revenue. The more we can retain that knowledge, the better. If we can assimilate more people from the private sector, not just coming in and having, 'cause the best people that succeed in coming from the private sector usually either come on to the very top and have to learn it, and there's a learning curve, or they come in at the very bottom and have to take a few steps backwards and work their way up very quickly. A lot of people aren't willing to take that, and financially cannot take that hit and go from $100,000 job in the private sector and come back in as a 40 or 50 or 60,000 job in the public sector. So we're not getting that stuff. Having rotations, having private public partnerships in the procurement space, sharing knowledge, some mergers, and having joint conferences, the NCMA, NIGP conferences with like the international ones that are in the private
right.
sector, looking for some joint certifications, urging people in the public sector to get some private sector experience and take a sabbatical or take a couple of years, and then vice versa. So we're cross-trained in those areas. I think we can bring those synergies together. When things are great, sometimes people go into the private sector, and then when things are bad, they move to the public sector. So I do see
Right.
some people on their resumes going back and forth, but I don't see as many as that could be. But
Yeah,
I think when I do see that, you see a lot of people going into consulting, a lot of people getting into that niche
yeah.
where they're trying to get new businesses that have never done business with a certain entity or a certain cooperative, whether it be SWAM certified or registered at the right databases and sources, registered in sam.gov, for instance, etc. But getting them through those hurdles so they can get on the GSA schedule, so they can do business with the federal, state, and local government. So a lot of opportunity there, and pretty
Yes.
excited about it.
Yes, pretty excited about it. And I think the best point I thought is the more fluid the movement is, the more we move from public to private and private to public. I think that would increase the knowledge and awareness and all. So nice thought. Chris, I'm done with my questions. It's been a very good learning session for me. Learn the other side of it things also. Before we end, is there anything that you would like to add?
I would just like to thank everybody for listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, and thank you for hosting it. Really a big fan of your work and following you on LinkedIn and everything. And that to encourage everyone to stay connected in conversation and help that synergy continue to go. And I believe overall, the procurement profession is one of the most giving, sharing professions that we're not in competition. The rising tide rises all ships. So to continue to connect, if you're not connected to myself and to you on LinkedIn, to please do so. Maybe we could provide them the link and the QR code somewhere in your post or on this podcast. That would be
Right.
fantastic. And I look forward to hopefully future conversations. Maybe we can dig deeper into any one of these topic
Yeah.
areas at a later date.
Yes, I would look forward to that as well. Uh, Talking to you again on a different episode because there is a lot of good topics to cover. But before we end, is there a contact information that you would like to share? I would put that in the comments.
That's my LinkedIn profile. And then I have my email. If you want to email me, it's 6starprocurement@gmail.com.
Mhm.
And then the two best ways to reach me would be that email, or even better, is that once you're connected to me on LinkedIn, is to send me a direct message. Believe it or not, that's my number. Even my wife, if she needs to get a hold of me, she direct messaged me on LinkedIn. So start at LinkedIn, kind of old
Sure.
school.
So I'll put the contact information on the comment section.
Sounds good.
Right. So thank you again, Chris. Lots of learning. I hope whoever is listening to this, it would be a learning for them. And again, they get interested in this, they go out and research, they contact you, and then they learn more about it, and we elevate profession in this process. So that's the goal of this podcast. So again,
Great.
thank you so much for your time. To all who are listening, thank you for listening. Have a nice day then. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel.